Despite May job losses, employers worry workers won't return reports of heart inflammation among small number of children that got Pfizer. vaccineAtlantic province's reopening plans include proof of vaccine. strategyTrudeau calls for apology from the Catholic Church for role in residential schools enforcing the rules on a heatwave weekend. What to expect at the 2021 Juno Awards. Making meals for hungry Manitobans, our love language, chef. Local community group keeping the Don Valley clean. N.S. Mass killing inquiry members make first visit to Portapiquem's cooking and pineapple crush. Why these NL expats can't wait to come home. Mayor says he has little hope. Ottawa will support his vaccination plan. Canada trying to firm up Moderna supply via US instead of Europe. Trudeau describes talking about residential schools with Pope Francis a moment of grace. Priest says he wants Pope Francis to apologize for residential schools. Windsor woman uses ribbons to honor Kamloops residential school victims. This isn't about recreation. Dr. Jazz Atwell says amendment allowing splash pads, pools meant to help vulnerable people. Load error in an email to Global News. PHAC said as of May 26, of the 1,130 travelers that have received a fine for not going to one of the government-authorized accommodation, GAA, known as quarantine hotels, fewer than 10 have tested positive for the virus on either their Day 1 or Day 8 test. In February, the federal government implemented more stringent rules for travelers returning to Canada. Currently, anyone who enters Canada by air has to stay at a GAA for 3 days, and must provide proof of a negative COVID-19 test taken 72 hours before their departure. Travelers must foot the bill for a stay at a GAA, which could cost as much as $2,000. They must also undergo a 14-day mandatory quarantine. Travelers who enter Canada through the land border are not required to stay at a GAA, but must quarantine for 14 days, and take a test for COVID-19 on Day 1 and Day 8 of their quarantine. The Public Health Agency of Canada said it ensures all travelers arriving by air have a government-authorized accommodation, GAA, reservation, and follows up with all travelers that have a reservation but fail to check into their hotel. PHAC said it also seeks support from police for enforcement of non-compliance, as appropriate. The federal government has, for months, been urging Canadians to avoid all non-essential travel. However, according to data released by the Canada Border Services Agency, between March 21, 2020 and May 30, 2021, a total of 13,287,143 travelers entered the country. Of those, 10,671,487 entered by land, while 2,615,656 arrived by air. Could Delta variant put pause on provincial reopening plans? B.1.617 first detected in India to be dominant COVID-19 strain in Peel region. Top doctor says New Brunswickers who had AstraZeneca can mix COVID-19 vaccines following NACI guidance. Doctor says provinces get green light from NACI to mix and match COVID-19 vaccines. B.C. First Nation halts search for answers. Traditional healing and grieving underway. Shameful. Catholic Church hasn't apologized over burial sites discovered at BC residential school. Indigenous Services Minister says Saskatoon long-term care home excited by easing of restrictions. 42 recommendations made after Alberta long-term care review. Winnipeg MP Leah Garzon says residential schools should be treated as a crime scene. Mark Miller reads out names of children known to have died at Kamloops residential school. Trudeau reflects on loss of 215 children buried at former Kamloops residential school. Ontario MP Pam Damhoff says Canada was founded on racism and colonialism. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe outlines roadmap for provincial reopening steps 2 and 3. Defence Minister Sajan welcomes findings of military justice system review. Mercedes Stephenson sits down with Canada's acting top soldier for the first time. PHAC said it ensures travellers are compliant with the Quarantine Act, regardless of their mode of entry, adding that the agency makes over 20,000 verification calls and over 4,000 in-person compliance verification visits daily. The agency said it tracks travelers arriving by air and land that have not completed their testing, regardless of the reason, in order to bring them into compliance with the testing requirements. PHAC added, though, that it does not track the reason provided for not having completed the test. The panel said the current requirement that all air travelers must quarantine in a GAA should be discontinued. Dr. Isaac Bogoch, an infectious diseases faculty member at the University of Toronto, who was also a member of the expert advisory panel, told Global News that it's either time or will very soon be time to have our border policy evolve to keep up with the growing number of Canadians that are vaccinated. Bogoch said ultimately it is up to the federal government to decide when to make changes to the measures at the border, but said he hopes they are made sooner, rather than later. We have more and more Canadians with a first vaccine dose, More and more Canadians with the second dose and cases plummeting in Canada, he said. According to Vaccine Tracker Canada, by Sunday afternoon, 61.12% of the Canadian population had received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, while 7.38% were fully vaccinated. Bogok said, "Obviously, we can't just flip a switch and go back to what things were like in 2019. But if you look at the proposed suggestions for updated policy, I think it really fills a gap during an interim period where COVID is still a public health risk, but more and more Canadians are having a first and second dose," he said. Could Delta variant put pause on provincial reopening plans? B.1.617 first detected in India to be dominant COVID-19 strain in Peel region. Top doctor says New Brunswickers who had AstraZeneca can mix COVID-19 vaccines following NACI guidance. Doctor says provinces get green light from NACI to mix and match COVID-19 vaccines. B.C. First Nation halts search for answers. Traditional healing and grieving underway. Shameful. Catholic Church hasn't apologized over burial sites discovered at BC residential school. Indigenous Services Minister says Saskatoon long-term care home excited by easing of restrictions. 42 recommendations made after Alberta long-term care review. Winnipeg MP Leah Garzon says residential schools should be treated as a crime scene. Mark Miller reads out names of children known to have died at Kamloops residential school. Trudeau reflects on loss of 215 children buried at former Kamloops residential school. Ontario MP Pam Damhoff says Canada was founded on racism and colonialism. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe outlines roadmap for provincial reopening steps 2 and 3. Defence Minister Sir John welcomes findings of military justice system review. Mercedes Stephenson sits down with Canada's acting top soldier for the first time. Bogok said Canada can't throw caution to the wind. The policies in place now can be adapted to reflect the current risk.